So one really important set of topics are sort of the near-term business cycle. How's the United States and the rest of the world looking right now in terms of economic recovery? So the U.S. and many other countries seem to be coming out of the recession in some measures, not all measures. In particular, like the labor market in the United States is still under a lot of pressure. But around the world, too, there's signs of recovery in the Eurozone, in Japan, especially in middle and low-income countries like China and India, where growth hadn't turned negative, it had just slowed. So one big set of issues I talk about is what's driving economic recovery, how does that link with what caused the recession, and what policymakers are doing to make things better for business, or in some ways making it harder for business to see where there's new market opportunities, where there should be hiring people and undertaking some CapEx. So that's one set of topics. A second set of topics is looking out beyond just next quarter, or maybe even beyond even this fiscal year, looking out several years a little bit more strategically to try to understand what are some of the economic and political forces of globalization. So issues here include things like demographic changes in the United States and around the world. There are aging populations in many countries around the world. Some people don't know, though, it's not just an advanced country challenge. China, on a lot of the standard measures, is one of the most rapidly aging populations on the planet. India looks very different, and the big difference there is China having had the one-child policy in place for decades, India not having a policy like that. So thinking about some of these medium and longer-term issues that face global businesses is a second set of topics that's very important. And then a third set of topics is focusing back a little bit more in the United States in particular, where I live and work and where a lot of our companies are, trying to dig into some of the political economy challenges that the United States faces in the coming years. Here these includes things like our globalization policy, why there's a protectionist drift underway in U.S. economic policy as we're becoming less open to trade and investment and immigration. What are some of the fiscal and tax challenges our country's going to have to figure out? A lot of these issues affect families, but they're very critical for U.S.-based businesses as well when they think about what's the set of rules and tax regimes that they're going to be trying to operate on in the coming many years. I think part of the value I bring is my hat as an academic. I mean, I teach at the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth. I'm an associate dean there. So my time in terms of my academic research and my teaching, both executive education, of which I do a lot, and teaching the MBAs, brings me into contact with a lot of the current business thinking in the academy, as people will say, that's quite useful to bring into talks to make points of contact with what business leaders are seeing in their daily business. The time that I had in Washington, D.C., I served for close to 2 years on the Council of Economic Advisors. That brought a lot of new perspectives to my understanding on how business policy gets made. By serving on CEA, I was involved in a lot of those policy conversations in the Oval Office, at the Fed, and elsewhere. And that insight has continued in the time that I left public service and returned to Dartmouth. I continue to do a fair bit of work with folks in the executive branch, but also in Congress with congressional briefings, congressional testimony on issues of how our capital market is doing in the United States, issues of global economic policy as well. And so it's sort of that blend of the academic research and the teaching that I do, ongoing outreach to companies and business groups, and that time in Washington that often provides kind of a unique blend of insights. So any talk, I'll enjoy reaching out to the client, understanding what their needs are. Boy, we really want to know about the global business cycle, or we really want to know about the U.S. consumer and what pressures are on household balance sheets and income statements. Or they might have an industry focus, or whatever the combination is. I think a successful engagement, first you got to understand what the needs are for the client. And then I tend to be kind of a data geek, so I like to, for my talks, prepare a fair bit, so I make sure I have the right skill set and knowledge. Depending on the setting, I'll oftentimes prepare a pretty detailed PowerPoint presentation that, to guide the talk, that can provide a takeaway for the audience participants that they can have afterwards or during the talk. And I enjoy conversation as well. So again, depending on the nature of the setting, more conversation as opposed to just me speaking, more questions and answers, I think oftentimes builds a better learning environment, not just for people in the audience, but for myself as well.